evening, everyone. My name is Niyi Adewole, host of the Akaba Home Financial Freedom Mastermind Group, and I'm excited tonight to bring you the story of Deji, who is a seasoned professional. He has a background in systems engineering, has worked for multiple Fortune 500 companies, helping save millions of dollars for these companies in process engineering and improvement, and making the transition successfully from a W-2 into full-time real estate entrepreneur. Deji, thank you for joining us tonight.
Hey, man. Thank you for having me, man. Thanks for the introduction as well, man.
Of course. It's a pleasure having you here. It's awesome being able to finally get this conversation together. And I really want to just dig into your story. I think that your background is incredible. The fact that you were moving up the corporate ladder and then decided to say, hey, I'm going to take a step back from this and move into real estate. A lot of people are scared to do that. Can we just take it back to the beginning and kind of how you got even into engineering to begin with?
Sure, absolutely, man. So where do I start? I mean, born in Maryland, raised in Nigeria, parents are both Nigerian, so they wanted us to have that background. I say that because as a Nigerian growing up, you really only have three options, right? Either you're a lawyer, you're a doctor, or you're an engineer. That was the joke growing up. And I picked engineering simply because I believed it was the path that required the least amount of school, that would still give me a decent enough income to be able to live a comfortable life, right? That was just my general thought at the time. I didn't necessarily have any passion for engineering or anything like that. So I ended up going to Georgia Tech, got an engineering degree from there. And from there, started working multiple corporate jobs, like you mentioned. So worked at Coca-Cola, Equifax, UPS, all at the headquarters over here in Atlanta, Georgia. And for me, my first job gave me a lot of great exposure and opportunities, right? I got access to a lot of different senior leadership team. I was working on cool projects. They literally let me work anywhere in the world that I wanted to work. Coke is the global company. But the one thing that it didn't have to offer me was freedom of time and place, right? That was the thing that I first realized was I needed to keep working. I needed to keep being present, and I needed to keep doing these things to earn a paycheck. So I was grateful for the opportunity, but I knew that they had to be more. So at the time, I started looking into other options and opportunities. I've pretty much done a lot of different businesses and stuff, and real estate was it for me. It not only gave me the freedom, right, through cash flow and equity and stuff, but it also has security. So making that transition for me was something that I set my mind to. I made a plan towards it, and I was committed to it. I executed on that plan, and within 3.5, 4 years, I made my exit.
It's incredible what you can do when you focus in such a short amount of time, right? People think, man, this is going to take forever. It's going to take a decade. But if you focus and buckle down, it really can happen in just 2 to 3 years. It's incredible how quickly you can move through that and really start to accomplish it. And it happens a lot quicker than you would think. The universe starts to kind of move in that direction to help you achieve those goals. And so one of the things that was super impressive is the fact that while working the W-2s, while moving through the corporate sphere, you were able to actually acquire over 30 units in real estate. And I really want to understand what made you start to even think about real estate as an option, and what did that first deal look like?
Oh, man, great question. So what got me to look into real estate was a few things, a few thought processes. For one, I was, and I still am, under the thought belief that you want to try as many things as possible when you're young, right? So for me, I was just curious as to what opportunities laid in different ventures and different businesses. So I explored a lot. So it was inevitable that I would try real estate. And then the other thing for me is just, and I think this probably goes for the majority of people in general, like everybody kind of knows about real estate, about the power that real estate has to make somebody financial free, but it's the how that typically trips people up, right? So in the back of my mind, I always knew that it was something that I wanted to be a part of. I didn't know to what extent, I didn't know how, I didn't know the details, but I kind of always knew that I was going to be involved with real estate to some capacity. So I got in through networking with different people, joining different organizations, just learning, and also learning from people who were doing it. So I'm also under a big believer that if you want to do anything, it doesn't matter what it is, the simplest way to do it and the most effective and efficient way really is to just find somebody that's doing it and then just follow them. So that's exactly what I did.
I love it. I love it. And to that point, what did that first deal look like? And how did you come about it?
Great. So my first deal was actually a single family property that I flipped, right? So when I first started, my biggest interest was in flipping. And that's really what caught my attention with real estate. I liked the fact that you could buy a property, you fix it up, make it look nice, and then sell it for, a huge profit, right? That was at the time what my desire was. So for my first property, I bought a single family home. It was 3 bedrooms. Actually, it was 4 bedrooms, 2 bath, had a basement, and I got it through a wholesaler that I had connected with. So I networked, I met a wholesaler who had the opportunity, and I was very eager to get my first deal under my belt. So I moved forward with it. I funded it using hard money, right? So I got a hard money lender also through that same wholesaler, right? And through networking, I got a project manager and I got a contractor at the same time on my first deal. My project manager, and this was something that's was kind of unique, and I think it kind of still is. People usually don't get a contractor and a property and a project manager, but it was helpful for me as well because I was working a W-2 job, and having an extra layer of quality control and oversight was helpful. So it was a single family home. I got a hard money lender to lend it to me. I think I got it for about 125, 135 thereabout. Put in another 40,000 to do the renovations, and then it was worth about 270, 275 is what I ended up selling it for.
That is incredible. And you mentioned that you're in the Atlanta market. What year was this that you got that first property and kind of put that work in and was able to build that equity?
Yeah, so that was in 2017.
Nice. I'm sure a lot of people on the call, because we do have a lot of individuals that join that are from the Atlanta area, nice, that wish they were buying in 2017, right? Because it's accelerated quickly. I don't know that you can get a house that's even standing for 170 right now in Atlanta. And so
right. Things have changed. Things have definitely
changed quickly.
A lot. Things have changed a lot. And that's why I always tell people, man, and things are going to change even more. So now I think the median price is in that same area that I bought for 170, for 130 at the time. Now those houses are going for close to 400s right now. Some of them are already in the 400s in that same area. And I tell them, I'm like, it's 400 now, but in the next 5, 10 years, it's going to be 600, 700. I mean, that's just the trend. So I tell people, don't think about how much it's already grown. Think about how much it's going to grow. And don't let the fact that you didn't start in 2017 hinder you from starting now.
And that's the key. Literally, even I have conversations on the daily with newer investors, and they're like, hey, should I wait for this? And maybe I should save up more and do this. And it's like, guys, if you can just get started and stay consistent, you're going to be happy that you bought that house in 2023 when it hits 2025, 2026, 2027. Real estate is one of those things where it just gets better with time, right? It's like fine wine, right? When you buy that thing and you let it just sit there and keep continuing to kind of build your wealth, it will do that, especially if you buy in solid areas or in a city like Atlanta where, I mean, it's on the top 10 of every list of migration, right? And over the next decade, we know kind of all the factors that are driving the values up. So you're right. Absolutely right. Your main key is just to get started and stay consistent.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I think I just want to add to that, man. That was a very good point you made. Get started now for many reasons. And I tell people the same thing because people are scared right now, right? There's a lot of fear being driven and sold on the news and all of that. So people are always asking me yeah, interest rates are high now. When should I wait? Should I buy? And this is what I say. I say there's never a bad time to buy real estate. It's just about buying the right kinds of real estate and making sure that you have the right strategies in place. That's what it is. Because even if you talk to people and real estate investors in 2008 and you talk to them, they'll tell you they wish they bought more. You know what I mean? And as far as today's market with interest rates and stuff go, I tell people, I say, if you are able to make a deal work at the current interest rates, meaning it's a solid investment, you're getting cash flow on it and stuff, even at today's rate, then it's a buy, because ultimately whether the rates go up or down, that's not something you can control. But if it goes up, then you got it at a lesser price. And if it goes down, you can refinance. And guess what? You would have had a tenant build and pay down your debt while giving you cash flow, while enjoying tax benefits along the way. So there's never a bad time to buy real estate. This is just about buying the right kinds of property with the right strategies.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the whole spectrum and journey that you took is one that the audience has heard from me. And I've taken a similar journey where while working the W-2, started investing, started building up that capital, and it allowed me to be able to move into full-time real estate. And I know that that was a huge thing for you, right? When you got started and buying that first property in 2017, being able to eventually move into it full-time. When did you feel like you had enough kind of going for you to make that move? And how did you end up making that transition? Because I know a lot of people struggle with this, and it's tough, right? You grew up your whole life. To your point, I grew up in a Nigerian household too, and there's nothing about the real estate piece. It's all about, hey, I was going to be an engineer too, right? I switched over to business before the end of school, but engineer, lawyer, doctor, that's the norm.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure there was a lot of pushback, a lot of things that were internal to you, like, hey, I already have a career going. Why would I make that move? But what made you actually make that jump into full-time entrepreneurial real estate world?
I'm going to say this, and it's going to sound like it's not the full truth, but it is. I asked myself one simple question. Well, two questions, really. The first question is, if I keep doing the things I'm doing today, in the next 5, 10 years, 30 years, 40 years, am I gonna look back and be proud? Or am I going to be where I want to be, rather, is the question I asked myself. Am I going to be where I want to be in the next 10 to 20 years if I keep doing what I'm doing today? That was the first question. And then the second question was, if I was to fail, meaning go full-time into real estate and it not work out the way I wanted it to work out, would I regret making that decision more than if I didn't make that transition and 10 years and 20 years down along the line, would I regret that? And my answer was simple, man. My answer was yes. I would regret not even trying. What I mean, not trying. That's what I would regret more than anything. Like, if I try and fail, I could always go back and get a job. Jobs are not going anywhere. You know what I mean? Even though I wasn't really thinking that way, but I was just thinking, this is something I got to do. And as from a process standpoint, from that point on, after I made that decision, it was okay. And now I have to work on having 6 months of living expenses, right? So I had 6 months of living expenses saved up. And then at that point, I do believe I had about 10 tenants, maybe 12 tenants at that time as well, right? So about 12 units at the time. Yeah, about 12 units at the time. And at that point, I thought I had a solid enough baseline to be able to take a risk like that. Yeah.
And I love it. And I think more people should do this, right? Especially while you're young. Like, we're in the quote unquote millennial generation where people are like, hey, they're jumping from job to job. But it's one of those things where it's like, hey, what we're doing is we're actually taking those risks before you get the golden handcuffs on you, and it becomes even more difficult. Because as you get older, as you get more responsibilities, things of that nature, move up to higher and higher levels within the company, it's harder and harder to take these types of risks. And so I applaud you for doing it. And now it's like it opens up your world to so many more opportunities. I was literally having this conversation with a client yesterday, and we were just talking about the importance of just from a young age taking small risks and kind of building upon that to the point where you're able to really capitalize on opportunities that other people may pause at jumping on. And so that's incredible. The fact that you were able to get to those 12 units while working, and I'm assuming you were managing those units too?
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. That's please help me with that. What systems and how were you managing those units yourself while working a full-time W-2?
Man, that's a great question. So I think a few things helped, right? A few things helped. I was able to minimize the maintenance, right? The day-to-day maintenance on all my units due to the strategy that I employed to get them, right? So how I bought all my units is I buy value add real estate, meaning I buy the properties, I add value through renovations, right? And then I rent them out. So the first thing that helped a lot was that the units that I was renting out were units that I had renovated, right? So this, in my opinion, largely limited the amount of maintenance work I had to do to those units, right? So that helped. And then the second thing is I predominantly rent out my units on Section 8, right? So I have the government pay me rent, and that's also important because they do annual inspections, meaning you have to make sure that the properties are in tip-top condition, right? So those processes were in place to ensure that the maintenance was great. So it didn't really involve a lot from that perspective. So the other thing that helped were just the different software, Appfolio, for example, that you use to manage tenants. You know what I mean? Having a streamlined approach to collecting rents. And yeah, most of the stuff that I had to do from a management perspective was limited because of those reasons.
No, I love it. I love it. And utilizing the software is huge. Folio is a big one. I know like large property management companies that use those. I personally used Buildium when I was managing my own. But when we got over Buildium, yep.
Nice.
But when we got to double-digit units, it was like, all right, time to move it over to property management. I am stretched thin. Yeah. And so much respect to you for still being able to kind of manage that whole piece and really leaning heavy into it. And one of the pieces that I know that you preach and kind of talk to some of the people that you mentor is about using other people's money to continue to grow your number of units. It's tough to earn enough capital from just a regular W-2 to keep recycling that and use it to kind of grow your portfolio. It could take many years. But what is your take on using other people's money, and what are some strategies that you've implemented?
Great question, actually. So using other people's money. So, and what strategy? So let me talk about the strategy first, and then I'll talk about the different types of other people's OPM, right? So the strategy that I employ, like I said, is the bird method, right? So I buy, renovate, rent it out, refinance, and then repeat the process. So part of the way that I was able to scale was because of the strategy, right? Building equity and then leveraging that equity. But like you said, at some point when you want to scale more and get even more units, you have to engage other people's money. And some of the different strategies that I used from that perspective was building up and leveraging personal and business credit. Right. So that was really huge. I mentioned I used to work at Equifax, so I picked up some things there in terms of from a credit perspective and leverage perspective. And I was able to leverage that to establish personal and business credit that I used to help fund and manage some of those deals. The other method was using life insurance. Right. So there's life insurance policies out there that you can engage that have a cash value that you can leverage and borrow out against, right, to do renovations, as well as to do purchases and invest in real estate. The third OPM that I used was, I raised capital, right? So I raised capital from friends and family, right? And I gave them returns on the deals, and I was able to use that to invest in more real estate as well. And then another cool strategy that I used actually was by leveraging my 401k, right? That's one thing I think a lot of people that work 9 to 5s have access to, and that's something that they can also leverage as well. Man, I'm so glad you brought this up. I'm really, really glad you brought this up, because whenever I tell people I do Section 8, they have their antennas go up, same reaction. But hey, man, the truth is this, man. The Section 8 that people are used to and the bad reputation that it has is due to the old program, right? The program has since evolved tremendously, and it has a lot of provisions for landlords and investors like myself to benefit from. First thing being, of course, the rents are guaranteed. Everybody pretty much knows that. So the government pays you, and you have a contract with the government through the Housing and Urban Development Program, right? This gives you security, and gives you confidence to scale your portfolio. The other thing that I like about the program is they actually pay the security deposits for some of the tenants as well. So they have a feature called an LIF, Lease and Incentive Fee, where they will give you, and it's non-refundable. So they give you that as really you get to keep it. You determine what your security deposits are. You know what I mean? So that's great. The other thing I like is they do have an insurance program that you are automatically enrolled into as a landlord in the program. So they'll cover up to, I believe, $2,500. It's either per room, per unit, per door, or something like that. But that's an added layer of security that you have as a landlord that you wouldn't get if you were just renting it out on the marketplace. Let me see, what else do I like? They have an endless pool of tenants. So you're never in a situation where you're trying to decide if you won't find somebody to rent your property out. So that's great too. And then as far as my process for vetting tenants, I leverage Zillow to do it. Zillow has a function for landlords that allow you to not only list your property and blast it out to different sites, but also to be able to vet and manage the tenants as well once you get them. So you can vet them by getting their credit reports, seeing if they have any evictions on there, getting access to background checks as well, and then also doing references. And when you're getting references, guys, don't get references from current landlords. You want to get references from past landlords. And the reason for that is because current landlords might give you a great review because they want to get them out. So think about that. But yeah, those are the things that I put in place: credit checks, background checks, employment verification, and get references. And your chances of getting a bad tenant after that are slim to none. That's a great question. And I'm actually very passionate about doing that because I understand the position that those people are in, because I myself was in those exact shoes. And I remember the way I felt in that situation. I was desperate for the kind of support that I'm providing today. So it's something that I take very seriously and I'm very passionate about. And basically what it looks like is, I tell people this: with the program, you're not getting information from the program, you're getting transformation. And the difference is, with transformation, you are getting not only the support, the guidance, and all the other stuff that are common with coaching, but you're getting results, right? So you're getting results as part of the program, right? We're helping people get into properties, like get properties and close on deals. And what that process of getting them from starting to actually getting to the closing table is, there's 3 boxes that need to be checked in order for people to be successful at anything really, but specifically with real estate. First is making sure that they have the right information and strategy, right? So what information and strategy? There's multiple strategies, but if you don't have a focused strategy that's going to help you get from A to Z, then it gets more difficult to actually obtain it, right? So that's the first box. The second box is making sure that they have accountability in place. So accountability is not just being accountability like an accountability partner, processes and systems. And then the third box is support and guidance, right? So even if they have the right strategy, you have the right information and strategy, and even if you're being held accountable by a system or process or person, you're still going to have challenges, roadblocks, etc., that you're going to need to be able to navigate. So having a support system in place to help you throughout that process is going to be very important. Now, I say that because the first thing that I make everybody that joins the program do is I make them take a training, an online training. So it's an online training that covers the strategy and the information box, right? It checks that box off. It's an online training that I created that basically details step by step how I went from 0 to 34 units in 3 years, how to find properties, how to know what to look out for in any market, how to know where to invest in, and how to get value out of property, and how to get access to the funding. Different ways to get access to the funding that you're going to need. And then after that, how do you get tenants? How do you vet out the tenants to get the right ones? And then how do you leverage that property to get more and scale, right? So that's the information strategy piece. And the next piece is, once they're done with that, is we hop on a strategy call, right? So that's a one-on-one call where I basically get to know that person more uniquely, so that I can help them create a personalized investing action plan. Everybody's different. Different people have different incomes, some people have W-2 income, some people have businesses, some people have good credit, others might not. So the strategy is going to be a little bit different for everybody. So this strategy call helps me to be able to outline that. And then after that, the next step is holding their hands and helping them take action and get those results from that point on. We have weekly coaching calls where I get pulse checks on what they're working on. I help them with their deals and ultimately help them get to the closing table. So that's what that frame looks like, and that's the reason for it as well.
Yeah, you got a new system on me, Niyi. I see you upgrade. I see you, man. I see as I'm gonna get cut off in the next 5 minutes. I gotta rush it. Oh, all right, cool. No, cool. So I heard that you was pretty much talking about the way you build up your portfolio, and you did it pretty fast. I'd say 3 years, a lot of units. Has it been like smooth selling, like in the 3 years? And if not, like what's the turbulence? Because I see that you turning a lot of money and you digging in a lot of money, and sometimes people might not understand the profit part and the pressure sometimes. You know what I'm saying, trying to keep up and pay a lot of the bills that you kicked out, because you still in a process of where you kicking money and you never really recover what you pretty much kicked out, what you see. So tell me about that if you can touch on it.
Absolutely, man. And that's a great point. So as far as I'll kind of go in reverse. So I'll start off with the back end as it pertains to the funding piece that you mentioned about running out and having to keep investing. So I think with that, what helped me in that regard was basically planning, right? Planning and understanding upfront, what do I need, right, to complete this project? What's the timeline to complete this project? What contingencies am I going to put in place so that if something went wrong, how am I going to be protected, right? So I think planning helps to mitigate a lot of that risk. Luckily, I had a mentor, right, who had been doing this, and he put me on the right track. So some of those things, those contingencies that I mentioned before, I'll give you an example. With my flip, right? When I was flipping the properties, one thing that enabled me to stay on track and make sure that I wasn't overspending was I hired a project manager at the time because I didn't have the experience. So I hired a project manager who did have the experience of managing timelines, managing the contractors, managing budgets. And I learned a lot. I picked up a lot of things from her, right? With the actual contractors, and I put contingencies in the budget, right? Just in case if something came up, there was money there that I had already accounted for. Right. So I always put a 5 to 10% contingency on the budget. So if I'm expecting to pay $100,000 for a project, I'll plan for $110,000. So if something comes up, I have a contingency in place and I'm not burned. Right. I think those are some of the little things that can help or that help me avoid costly mistakes along the way. I'll give you another example as it pertains to managing your contractors. I pay my contractors using a strategy called draws. Right. Those are the same strategies that lenders use when they lend people money to invest in real estate, like hard money lenders. So they pay you in draws, and they pay you in draws for a reason. Right. It helps mitigate their risk that you'll run off with their money. You see, a lot of them, I've heard that happen to investors. They pay contractors up front in full. What's the incentive for the contractor to work? Nothing. Chances he's gonna run away are higher. So just putting together contingencies and plans and having that experience to guide you is very important for those reasons. Same. Exactly.
Yeah, did you have to go into them contingencies though? Like I know you got them in place, but did you run into any problems in your 3-year run? Because I know like some
A-
people get lucky and they don't have any problem for 5, 6 years, and then things happen. It's part of the business.
Hey man, hey, things always happen and things are always going to happen. It's not about whether they're going to happen. They're going to happen. It's about how are you going to react to it? How are you going to solve the problem? I can tell you 100 different problems I've run into, and 100 different problems I'm still running into today. Right. The biggest part of the journey is how you react to the problems. Right. How do you find solutions to the problem? Are you going to crumble? And I'll give you some examples because I know you asked what kinds of turbulence have I come across. The first property I bought had $10,000 of water bill get transferred to me. $10,000 I wasn't accounting for. I didn't know until after I closed. Would you consider that turbulence? That was a lot of turbulence.
Yeah.
My head was hurt, but I was able to work it out with the lender who was supposed to make sure the title insurance was in place, right? And he was able to cover that because of that reason. So from that point on, I always made sure I had title insurance on all properties I was buying, right? I didn't just leave it up to the closing attorney or the lender or whatever. I make sure that it's on there. So that's something I learned from. But the solution was working with the lender to put that in place and make sure that it was covered. And the list goes on, man. It's been a lot. And again, it's part of the journey. You're going to come across challenges. It's not about the if, it's about when. But the most important thing is like, what do you do from there? And how do you solve that problem? And then how do you learn from that moving forward? From 2 units to 12. Sure. So like I mentioned before, the first one was a single family, right? That I flipped. I bought another single family. So that was the second one. Then the third one was the third property or the third deal was a duplex. Right. So it was a duplex that I brought. And this duplex, I think, was the most significant deal, right? To go from 2 to 12. And why the reason it was so significant is because it was a great deal that allowed me to pull equity from. And once I pulled equity from that deal, I was able to buy 3 more duplexes on the same street. Right. So the timing was perfect when those duplexes became available. And when I finished that project, so I was able to take out about 180,000 off that first duplex and get 3 more duplexes. And then that was an additional 6 units, right? So that was 8 units. And then from there, I got a triplex within a mile in that same area. And then after the triplex, I got a quad in that same area. So that was kind of how the first couple of deals was. So it was a single family, then it was a duplex, then it was 3 more duplexes, then it was a triplex, and then it was a quad, and then yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Gee, thank you for all that wisdom. Appreciate it. I had questions on Section 8. I was curious about that. You were mentioning a lot of pros to using Section 8 renting. What are the cons from your point of view, or any negative experiences, any gotchas that someone needs to watch out from?
Great question. Those are always the kinds of questions I like to ask about everything. So it's great that you asked. I would say the biggest challenge with Section 8 is the bureaucracy to get started, to get your property on the market. By bureaucracy, I just mean the processes, right? You have to of course become a certified landlord in the program, which once you've done that one time, you're fine. You don't have to do it again. Once you're done with that, then you have to also do an inspection. And those inspections can be pretty tough. What I mean, like there's a lot of boxes so that's the other thing. And then the time to kind of get started. So from the time where you want to get started to getting your first tenant in there can be a lengthier process than normal. So that's the biggest challenge. Now, as far as once the tenant has gotten into the property, then the only challenge from there, which is not really a challenge if you're really working it the right way, but the only challenge from there is like the annual inspections, right? So they do have annual inspections. So it just makes you as a landlord have to stay on your toes and make sure that you're taking care of your property, which I don't think is a bad thing.
Are the regulations clear enough when you're getting into for a unit to be approved as a Section 8 and for you as a landlord to be also licensed as Section 8? Is the blueprint clear enough for someone to understand and like have a checkbox?
Absolutely. Very simple, very straight to the point and easy. And that's to your point. Whenever I buy a property and I am going to go look at the property, I walk the property with my contractor and I give the contractor the list, right, of all the requirements to make sure that, okay, there's the power supply in the bathrooms and kitchen has GFI, for example, right? So making sure that they develop the place in the way that it aligns with what they're looking for. But yeah, it's very simple to follow.
Last question on Section 8 is there a way for you to build into the contract like the frequency and cadence of rent increases? How does that work in a Section 8 contract?
Oh, so I'm glad you asked that. So this is another thing I forgot to mention. So every year you can request a rent increase on your property, right? So, and you do that very, very easily. You go online to your landlord portal, you select the property you want to request a rent increase for, and then you just hit rent increase, and then they'll ask you for what the proposed increase is. They'll review it. They have a team that reviews it. If they accept it, and then they put that into effect. So yes, you can definitely do that, and you can request that annually.
What governs the percentage increase or the amount increase? How do you calculate that?
The market rate. So just like how they calculate most things in real estate, it's based off of comparables, right? So they'll take a look at what are similar places renting for type of thing. So that's how they typically go about it. And also, if you do they also have what's called rent boosts. So you can boost the rent even more if you check certain boxes. And so, for example, if you have like environment friend, if you have certain types of like toilets, if you install like new toilets that have a good flow rate with the water, if you have certain types of windows, there's certain type of things you can do to your property to get rent boosts. All you got to do is show them a receipt that you've done it, and they'll add it as part of consideration.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
For sure, man. Yeah.
And also, can I add,
Yeah,
I'm pretty familiar with, I think they actually changed their name. I just, people know it's Section 8, but it's under a different name because they, like you said, they changing it. But one thing that I really do like about it, the eviction process is very, very like landlord friendly because they don't really intervene. Once you go to court, and you actually get the eviction, they would suspend a voucher. And one thing about the voucher is a long waiting list, and 9 times out of 10, nobody is going to risk running their vouchers because they just can't jump to another property. And they will immediately square up whatever they owed you, even if they not even paying a $10 portion. Like sometimes it's just really like it's nice.
That's a great point, man. That's a great point. And that's also one of the reasons why I found the Section 8 tenants to be, in my opinion, better tenants, because they have more to lose. That voucher, like he says, is gold to them. And because they know that if they lose it, it's going to take a long time for them to get it back. And it's going to be harder for them to get into another property. You know what I mean? So it's like you have more leverage because of that.
Yeah, hey, so I got a question, and I joined a little late too, so sorry if you've already covered this, but I know you mentioned that you went up to, I think it's 34 units, or at least 30, which is dope, and I saw Niyi mention that you were in systems engineering as well, so I'm wondering, is that kind of where the cash was coming from to help fund the deals? I heard you said that you were doing flips, right? And I'm in a similar position with software engineering, not necessarily the flip side of things, but at least I also just purchased a 4 unit. So I'm trying to get that same ball rolling, right? It would be dope to have that same story in a couple of years, especially within 3. That's awesome, right? So I'm trying to understand, like, how were you able to kind of keep that snowball rolling, right? Especially once you kind of got out of your, like, primary mortgages and your residential. How were you able to kind of keep that going?
Great question, man. So I was able to keep it going because of the way that I buy properties in the first place, right? So I buy properties by creating equity, not necessarily by buying equity, right? So I create equity through renovations, right? Meaning I would buy a property, by the time I'm done with it, within 2 months, it's worth at least 40% more than I bought it. And I'd be able to leverage that equity to buy the next one. So I always had a bank that I was creating to scale. And then I started leveraging more tools, right? Like Niyi mentioned earlier, as an investor, you're like a builder with tools in a toolbox. So there's different, you want to sharpen all your tools. So I started leveraging business credit. I built business credit, personal credit. I leveraged those. I raised capital from friends and family, some deals as well. So you got to kind of get more creative at some point if you want to scale. What I mean, past that 4, 5, 6 door range, you got to kind of get a little bit more creative, like you mentioned, especially if you want to scale fast and scale faster, as opposed to buying the same two units. If you want to get to like 10 units, you're going to have to get more creative in that regard. Absolutely, man. And Desmond, you got enough to work with, man. You got more than enough, to be honest. I tell my students this all the time. I'm like, even if you don't have any deals, get the education. If you get the education, you can raise the capital if you have the education and the know-how. And especially if you have the right mentors or friends or partners that you can leverage to help you along the way, that will give you more confidence to go out there, raise that capital, right? Help people earn money and be involved in that process as well, and help you build your portfolio.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Sure. Ooh, that's a good question. I would say, I mean, if I was to pick, and I don't think these skills are limited to engineering, but I think the ones that helped me certainly was maybe analytical skills. So especially now that I work on bigger deals, the bigger deals are underwritten a little bit differently, right? So having analytical skills can really help you at that level. I would also say being organized, right? So I learned how to be organized through my 9-to-5 job. I learned, and then also raising capital, right? So raising capital means being able to put together a presentation. When as an engineer, I had to put together a lot of freaking presentations. So that helped. What I mean, now, do you need to be an engineer or have that background to do that? Certainly not, but it helped me for sure. Absolutely, man. So I always tell people, man, the best, so there's 2 ways that you can contact me and get in touch with me. The first is Instagram, right? So Instagram is, I'm very active on there. I'll probably see your message there within an hour of you sending me anything. And also, if you go to my website, you'll find a contact me button, as well as a place to see more about what I do and the services I offer. My Instagram is deji.ceo. That's myriad.ceo is my Instagram. And then my website is dejihambolu.com. Thank you, man. Peace.